They gave me 24 hours to leave the only home I've ever known. Mama Sarah's hands trembled as she held the eviction notice. The paper felt heavier than it should, as though it carried 40 years of memories pressed into a single moment. Outside, raised voices cut through the quiet afternoon. Her late husband's brothers stood in the compound, arguing loudly over who would take control of the land. "She has nothing," one of them shouted. "No children, no claim. She is empty-handed." The words pierced deeper than the notice itself. Mama Sarah said nothing. She turned away slowly and walked back into the house same house she had entered as a young bride, the same house where she had laughed, cried, and built a life beside her husband, Kofi. Now it felt like it was slipping through her fingers. She climbed the narrow wooden stairs to the attic. Dust floated in the air as she reached for an old bag tucked away in the corner. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Letters Kofi had written to her during the war. She held the bag close to her chest, as if holding him again. Years ago, life had not been easy, but it had been full. She remembered the long days they worked side by side, tending the land, building their home with their own hands. She remembered the laughter they shared over simple meals, the quiet evenings under the stars. And she remembered the silence, the kind that came from prayers that were never answered. They had waited for children, hoped for them, prayed for them, but none came. Still, Kofi never allowed sorrow to settle in her heart for too long. He would hold her hand and say, gently but firmly, "Sarah, your reward is not in what people see, but in what God has written." At the time, she didn't fully understand. A loud knock on the door pulled her back to the present. 24 hours, one of the brothers shouted from outside. "Be gone by tomorrow." The house fell silent again. With nowhere to go and nothing left to hold on to, Mama Sarah sat down in the attic and began reading the letters. One by one, slowly, carefully. She wasn't just reading words, she was saying goodbye to his voice. Most of the letters were filled with love, memories, promises. But then she reached the final one. Her hands paused. It was different. The tone was formal, unusual, and it wasn't addressed to her. It was written to a man named Mr. Henderson at a colonial archive. Her heart began to beat faster. The next morning, instead of packing her belongings, Mama Sarah wrapped the letter carefully and made her way to the local library. Time felt heavy as she waited. When the records were finally brought out, she began to read, and everything changed. Kofi had been working in silence for years. He had documented the original boundaries of the family land, records that went back decades. Records that proved the land had been wrongly claimed and redistributed. But that wasn't all. Inside the bag of letters were additional documents, hidden in plain sight. A deed, and several letters of intent, official, signed, witnessed. They revealed the truth no one expected. The land did not belong to the brothers. It belonged entirely to Mama Sarah. It had been gifted to her by Kofi's grandfather years ago because of her kindness, her care, and the way she had looked after him in his old age. Tears filled her eyes. Kofi had known, and he had prepared everything in advance. By the time Mama Sarah returned home, the brothers were already moving her furniture outside. "Leave it there," one of them barked. But before anything could go further, a vehicle pulled into the compound. Authorities stepped out. Documents were presented. Silence fell. The same men who had shouted just hours ago now stood frozen, unable to speak. The truth had been revealed. The house, the land, the legacy, all of it belonged to her. Mama Sarah looked at them, not with anger, not with revenge, but with calm authority. She could have sent them away with nothing. Instead, she spoke quietly. "You may keep a small portion of the land to farm, but you will never harass another widow again." They nodded, humbled, defeated not by power, but by truth. That evening, Mama Sarah stood in front of her home, the same home she had been told to leave. But now she understood. She had never been empty-handed. Kofi had not left her with nothing. He had left her with something far greater, a legacy of justice. When the world thinks you are forgotten, God is busy writing your vindication. If you believe your miracle is on the way, type Amen.